Put your hand up if you think you're a superhero. Okay. Put your hand up if you think you work at a firm that has superheroes within it. Yeah, so about half the room. So I've come to this idea that lawyers are superheroes, and I have a reason for that. I came to Brisbane 12 months ago, having travelled all over the world, and I've just finished a 12-month project working with a multidisciplinary law firm with over 120 lawyers. And I've been working with lawyers in the field around Queensland. And my impression of lawyers is they're a very special breed. They're a species of their own. And they share three traits in common, I believe. The first is they give their best. They really do give their best. The second thing is they work hard at what they do. And the third thing is they're really intelligent. And being intelligent is great if you use that intelligence to support your clients with their strategies and their needs. But having worked with a law firm now for 12 months, what I've realised is the shadow side to that. Just because you're good at helping your clients develop strategies doesn't necessarily mean you do it well for yourself. And when I thought back, I've spoken to medical association conferences on health and well-being in my time. I know friends in the web development space that don't even have websites. So that every profession tends to have a shadow side. So part of the reason I'm here today is not that you people can't do strategy, it's just you haven't been doing it. So I'm here to share a little bit about strategy. So I want to take you on a journey, and I want to drop some ideas along the way. Not all the ideas will be relevant for you, but some will. So I want you to take what works for you. I'm going to have you up and doing some different things, so we're going to have some fun. We're going to learn about how we sit relative to other players in the room. And we're going to get my friend out of the box in a minute. This is my friend. Oh, actually, before I do that, I'll give you a quick look at the agenda. Who's seen a TED Talk before? Yeah, they're great, aren't they? You've got to do them in 20 minutes. Now, I've been told I've got an hour. In fact, I might have a little bit more than an hour if we have some Q&A after 2 o'clock. So I thought, well, that's like 3 TED Talks. So if I've got 3 TED Talks, I can cover 3 topics instead of 1. So there's 3 ideas. The first idea is that there are traps for superheroes, taking my contention that lawyers are in fact superheroes, which indeed they are, and that these are the things we need to look at in terms of traps for superheroes. The second thing I want to talk about is sweet spots, as advertised. How do you find your sweet spot, and how do you find the sweet spot in your firm? And the last thing I want to do is, how do we craft strategy? So I'm going to bring some contemporary tools into the space and talk about how we might apply them. Does that sound cool? Who's interested in that journey? All of you, fantastic. All right, now, here's a picture of my mate, Fred. And Fred's pretty cool. He's a superhero in my mind because that's where I want to live. I've got myself a French fiancée. I'm going to be living, hopefully, in south of France in 10 years. I'm going via Singapore. I'm going to get there. But this guy lived here 150,000 years ago. He had it made. What a great place in the world to live, right? Yeah, he's my old mate, but he didn't make it. But I asked him to come over for this presentation, and I asked him to come out, and he's just coming from London. The guy knocked on my door this morning at my office, and here he is. This is Fred. Does anybody know who Fred is? He's similar to us, has a common ancestor, but he's not the same. Is he a Homo sapien? He's a Neanderthal. Well done, Kathy. He's a Neanderthal, all right? And what we do see in business from time to time is that those old law firm partners that never adapt and never change, they get to hang out with my friend Fred, all right? So Fred could speak, he would tell you a story, but his jaw's broken, so he can't. So I'm going to put Fred not in front of the screen, because Ian says that doesn't come through well on the... But I'll put Fred down here, all right? This will be a handy reminder of what not to do today. So if I need some leverage today, I'll just point to Fred. Now, Fred has an interesting story. He lived in a great place. He basically had Europe to himself. Fred's there in the pink. And because he had Europe to himself, he had this lovely sort of caveman, Fred Flintstone type existence. And his distant cousins, who are ancestors of ours, lived basically in Africa. But about 150,000 years ago, we started to migrate. We started to go out a bit further. And we went global. which is kind of interesting because that's what's happening in the law profession at the moment. Everything's going global. So the Homo sapiens decided they were going to go global. When they came across my old mate Fred here, they killed him. They got rid of him. He was eradicated. He couldn't compete. So the competitive prerogative for the law profession is absolutely here, and I'll talk a bit about that as we go through. So don't forget Fred, we'll come back to him. Now, fast track to more recent times, to the Middle Ages, I want to talk about two bloody battles that happened in France. The first was Henry III, and he took the British in, and he was taking great tracts of France away from the French. And there was a battle at Crécy, and then 69 years later, there was a battle at Agincourt. And this is what happened. Well, the English came in, and they had 8,000, and the French had 20,000. The English had a lot of commoners, or yeoman archers, who had longbows, and the French had aristocratic lords, noblemen, landholders that got on horses with knights and chainmail, and they went out, and they had these things called crossbows, which you fire with your finger. You load them up and you fire them like that, whereas the English had this. Who do you think won? Why? Longbow, all right. They had a technology advantage, all right. In fact, what happened was the English lost about 300, the French lost 16,000. These longbows were so powerful they went straight through the French armour and killed them. So it wasn't a particularly good day for the French. So if you were a strategic advisor to the French at this particular point in history, what would you advise them to do, Tony?
Buy a longbow.
Buy a longbow. It's not rocket science. It's like the guy next door has got some technology and they're doing well with it. Let's get it too. Do you think they did that? No, we are French. We do it our way. And if we have a look over here, down here at Agincourt, 69 years later, the English had 2,000 and they lost less than 200. The French had 10,000 and they lost 7. The French had made some changes. They strengthened the iron plate, they put a bit of chainmail on their horses, but they said, we will continue to use the crossbow. We will not use this English longbow. And they had enough of them from the last one. They could have reversed engineered a few, but they didn't. And what was interesting is we learned 3 things from that battle, is that the French suffered from inertia. They didn't adapt. They were arrogant and they didn't move forward. Sound like someone you know sometimes? There was technology available that was being proven and used, and they still didn't pick it up. They didn't pick up the longbow. And the other thing that was unfortunate for the French is prior to this particular battle, what they used to do is allow the survivors to run back to their villages and say, oh, the British were horrible, we should never fight them again, and leave a message. But Henry V was a different fellow to Henry III. He said, nah, just kill them all. So this was the first time in these sort of European battles of gentlemen where the survivors of the battle were actually slaughtered on the field. So the rules of the game had changed. So for the first part of my talk, I want to talk about inertia, technology, and the new rules of the game. Does that make sense? Okay. How many people have completed the little survey monkey quiz I sent out? Thank you very much. That's great. It also went out to 190 members of ALPMA. I got 16 responses. Inertia. And the questions were, for those that didn't do the survey, didn't see the survey, were too busy because they were suffering from inertia. Senior partners spent time looking at outward external issues. 30% of the time senior partners spend is outside the organisation. 87% of senior partner time is spent worrying about internal issues in the organisation, not a particularly strategic view of the world. The next question is, of that time, how much of that time spent looking out is spent considering for the 5 to 10 year horizon? And only 15% of the outward-looking time is spent looking at the distance beyond that second or third horizon. And the third question is, given that you are spending some of your time outward and future, how much of that time do you spend building a deeply shared test of perspective of the future? And it was 15%. And I know from working with other industries in Australia and in Asia that senior managers in other industries, typically the rule of thumb is around 40, 30, 20. So about 2.5% of the time is spent on strategic visioning, strategic planning. Now, based on the survey results, what we see is 1/3 of 1% is spent by 16. And I would suggest that the ones that responded may be the more proactive ones, for want of a better word. So this slide just smacks of inertia to me. This is the way we've always done it, this is the way we're always going to do it. And as long as what we've done keeps working, we'll keep doing it. But there's some things ahead. And there were some things ahead for the French, and there'll be some things ahead for us. Who has seen this movie? It's a great movie, isn't it? It came out 14 years ago when my girls were like this high. And The Incredibles 2 is coming out next month on the 15th of June, and I'm going to get out to go to see it with probably my grandchildren the way that my girls are going at the moment. But this is a little clip, and I'm typecasting syndrome as the nemesis as new law, because those of you in traditional law firms are going, new law. We don't like this new law. We want the old law. So here's new law, and then our old law heroes are so the ones that this is the way we did it, and this is the way it's done. You know, we're the Queensland Law Society, for God's sake. All right? So let's have a look and see what happens in this little clip.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool. Just like a movie. The robot will emerge dramatically, do some damage, throw some screaming people, and just when all hope is lost, Syndrome will save the day. I'll be a bigger hero than you ever were.
You mean you killed off real heroes so that you could pretend to be one?
Oh, I'm real. Real enough to defeat you. And I did it without your precious gifts, your oh-so-special powers. I'll give them heroics. I'll give them the most spectacular heroics anyone's ever seen. And when I'm old and I've had my fun, I'll sell my inventions so that everyone can be superheroes. Everyone can be super. And when everyone's super, no one will be.
Ooh. So, when everyone's special, when everybody has access to the law on the internet and can have an intelligence system behind that, then everybody can have that special experience of drawing up their contract online. So, yeah, there's an interesting message for those in the room that probably should have been here to listen to it. That was a little dark. This one's a little light. Who's heard of the Ross system? A couple of you? Anybody in the room using Ross right now? Anybody made a decision to purchase it or bring it into the firm? Okay, this is cool.
Ross helps lawyers answer complex legal questions with our proprietary legal cognition framework. Legal cognition analyzes the relationships and meanings of words to understand the legal concepts they form, enabling Ross to read through millions of laws and find precise answers. The more questions and laws Ross reads, the smarter it gets. Ross Intelligence, enabling lawyers to do more than humanly possible.
So if your firm isn't checking out Ross yet, it should. Because this piece of artificial intelligence and machine learning, par excellence, it's available in the market today, and it will do your jobs for you. And it will do it without error, and it won't need super or sick leave, it won't need any of those human things. This is the future. We look at current technologies today, not future technologies, what's available today. What we can see, and you can see it right across industry, is over to the right-hand side, as you look at it, these are activities that are highly susceptible to automation. As we come back towards this side, they're less susceptible now, but the future is still coming this way. So down the bottom it says the time we as a collective species spend doing certain tasks. So 7% of our time as a species is spent managing one another. 18% on the other end is spent doing predictable physical work. So if you have a quick look at that and say, what do I spend most of my time doing? Am I looking at data, processing data, collecting data? Am I someone that's applying expertise, which is in the orange? Or am I managing the stakeholder interactions because I'm a relationship person? Where do you sit? And it will give you a clue to where the technology is available. Now, the technology doesn't have to replace you. It can be, you can make it your friend and use it to leverage what you do. All right? This is a little snapshot of what's going on with technology. It's more powerful than a longbow, I can tell you. So, what does that mean practically for you as a business, as a firm? And I've split this up into 3 areas. You can use technology to make yourself more operationally effective. You can use technology to drive value around what you're already doing. But the other interesting thing with technology, you can use it to create a strategic advantage. And if you're in a competitive space, if you can use technology to be more competitive and more profitable, that's a good thing. Wouldn't you agree? Okay. So here's some examples for example, document review and automation apps. How many people are using them? Oh, a number of you, great. We all have anywhere, anytime devices at the moment. They're already here, we're hyper-connected. Who has automated billing systems that just look at a job? Yeah, a couple of you. This is what you can do to reduce the cost of your operation and make it more effective. We've already seen the machine learning example there. We can allocate low-value work to AI advisors. So we can give those tasks over to things like Ross or much smaller versions of that. We can do due diligence via AI research. Who has electronic discovery tools? Who uses those at the moment? A couple of you, which is great. Now, from a strategic point of view, because this market is a lot faster than it used to be, if you go back 60 years, the law market was evolving very slowly. It was a slow cycle market. But today it's not slow. It's not even a standard style market. It's actually moving quite quickly. The customer empowerment is quite high. And when you've got a market that's in this much flux, then a first mover advantage is an advantage. In the old market, you could be the first on the block with something like no win, no fee. We're Slater and Gordon. We're the only ones that do no win, no fee. But, and that was a bit of a risk. But today, I'm coming up the highway, Freeman and Turner got a big billboard saying no win, no fee. It's a standard for the industry now, right? So things are moving a lot faster. So if there's an advantage you can get by being the first into the space with it, grab it because it will give you returns. And that's because of the context we're in now. Vertical integration is where we move forward in the value chain. So we might typically go into a market or a customer or an industry, and we would become specialist legal counsel in that marketplace, beyond the confines of our normal firm. So that's an example of forward integration, all right? Backward vertical integration might be we set up some sort of way of training people so that they are an input to our firm. We might train people outside the normal education framework because we have plenty of graduates out there at the moment. What do we really want? So we backward integrate and we create our own training school, train the people that we want the way we want them and feed them into our system. So that's a vertical integration option. Horizontal is where we grab some technology and we do such a good job with it that we can then sell it to the market and we can charge a subscription for it. So if you're innovative and you're technically minded, you could horizontally integrate by saying, okay, we know what this is about, no one else is doing it, we will rent it out to the others and we'll become the industry standard. And you can make as much money from horizontal integration as you can from being a traditional law firm. So keep those in mind in terms of strategy. And I was talking to a few people here about the importance of relationship management before the talk. And clients are getting more and more needy. It's like a few years ago, I bought this phone. I used to be a Nokia fan because I thought they were the best phone. Then I got this thing. This is a Trojan horse. It took over my life. All right. So Apple created a very innovative product that enabled me to connect with them. And I had to fight the administration to bring my MacBook in today, but I am a loyal Apple guy because they love me and they look after me. Does that make sense? So if you can produce products or services for your clients that make them love you because you handle a lot of their needs, then you retain them and they'll tell their friends. And suddenly you'll be as big as Apple. So these are called strategic advantages. I sat down yesterday and I thought, I created this model from scratch yesterday. I was just sitting thinking, what's a slide that sums up what's going on in terms of the environment? And it's not exact. I didn't do thorough research. It was just my impression. So in 1960, my father had one lawyer that he used, and he's basically used that same lawyer his whole life, right? So it was a slow market. It was calm waters for the law profession. By 1990, there were players like Slater's in the market. The whole thing was getting disruptive. I've used no less than 12 lawyers in my life. My father's only ever used one firm, family firm. He's always used that firm. I've shopped around. I'm a different generation. We're moving now into 2020. We're in rough waters because what we have is a market that's evolved, and now the pace of technology is evolving. So we've moved around and we're up in the red space. And by 2050, the market will have settled down, the customer will understand the value proposition, it won't be looking for anything different, and it'll be a technologically led marketplace. So if you plan to be here in 30 years, you need to have a technological solution. You need to be integrated. Does that make sense? Yeah. This is a book that came out. Has anybody seen this book, The Failing Law Firm? Yeah? Interesting read. There are a lot of recommendations and remedies in that book, but when I summarised it, I came up with 3 dot points, because as a conference speaker, I've got to come up with dot points, 3 or 6 dot points. This is the way I operate. So I thought, what was the take-home? And one of the big take-homes was that a lot of firms that failed tolerated underperformance by partners. You know, he's the son of the founding whatever, he's the fat cat, he's been here forever, he did the work in the early days. He or she's not contributing now. Why are we paying them all this money? And the other thing it created was inequities with younger partners. If the senior partners who aren't contributing to the bottom line are taking big checks at the end of the day, and the junior partners who are winning the big contracts and winning the big cases are getting a small dividend, then they leave and they set up their own firms. And this is why firms fail, according to Parnell. And it makes sense. The other thing he said is that firms lack a strategic direction, which is why I'm here. I wouldn't be talking to you guys about strategy if you had it all sewn up. And the other thing they said is ineffective leadership. And I was sharing with someone at the break around leadership and strategy going together, that you can't be an effective leader if you don't have a strategy. And your strategy is going nowhere unless you've got someone to lead it. So these two things go together. So my talk today is about strategy. I'm not talking about leadership. On your tables, there's a 2-day intensive program running with a colleague of mine in Brisbane in July. So if you feel your team would like some leadership training, so they've developed the soft skills, the emotional intelligence, the sort of traditional leadership functions, the skills, and it'd be a great collegiate environment because there'll be leaders from different industries. There's a networking opportunity there. Take that along and have a look at it. Who's seen a Porter's 5 Forces before? Anybody heard of the 5 Forces? Good. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't feel so alone. That's good. Fascinating man. If you want to go to lunch with him, it'll cost you $50,000, and that's US. He's well regarded. He came up with the 5 Forces model, and I'll very quickly go through it for those of you that are not familiar with it. But if we look at the 5 forces, there's buyer power that determines the attractiveness of the industry and how profitable it will be. There's the threat of new entrants. Suppliers exert power. There's a threat of substitute products or services on our service. And in the middle, there's a degree of rivalry. If there's only 1 or 2 players in the market, there's not a lot of competition. If there's 2,000 players in the market, it's obviously got a high degree of rivalry. And the other one that's important is, that's come through in recent years, is this force of complementers. That there are other people out there, there are other businesses out there that are performing a function which, when their business goes well, your business goes well. And the law enjoys that relationship with a number of players. So if we have a quick look and do what we call a 5 forces analysis with one more force, what we've seen in terms of buyers is that client switching is more common. Clients are swapping around. Some of the bigger clients are developing their in-house teams, which is taking work away from the traditional players. We have this thing called new law, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the big 4 accounting firms have suddenly decided they want a legal practice. It's like, oh, who saw that coming? Then we're seeing increased rivalry at the top end of town, so that, you know, people are getting off one bus and on another bus, or they're changing seats on the bus, or they're getting a higher valued seat. So people are starting to negotiate based on their value rather than all these other seniority, traditional means of competing. So there's a lot of rivalry at the top end of town, a lot of competition in that space. There's a graduate surplus, which is great. There's lots of talent, lots to choose from. But as we go around there, that's the only green one we've found so far. So far, we'd have to say this industry is not looking as attractive as it used to. And then, if we think about technology, we've got expert systems coming in, we've got online contracts coming in, so this web-enabled law is certainly putting pressure on the industry. And the good news is we've got things like internet that connects us so we can do better law. We've got blockchain, we've got banks and insurers at the moment that are under the pump, so they need lots of counsel. And we've got government changes policy from time to time, and we need lawyers to help sort out the implication of that for the citizens. So those are sort of good players to have in the market. So when you write a strategy, it needs to have 3 parts to it. It has a syntax or a structure. First thing it has to have an objective or an ends. It's the goal part of the strategy. The second thing a strategy has to have a scope or a domain where you're planning to influence with that strategy. Right? The third part is what's your advantage? How are you going to do it? And a good strategy statement contains these 3 things. So if we have a look at this first strategy statement, I wonder if anyone in this room can tell me the name of the organisation that belongs to this strategy statement. We sell a wide variety of well-designed functional home furnishing products at prices so low that as many people as possible will be able to afford them. Any ideas? IKEA. Bingo. Right. Here's another one. Our strategy is to own and operate large, long-life, low-cost, expandable upstream assets diversified by commodity, geography and market. Close. Close. Big Australian. BHP. Big Australian. That's their strategy statement. Can anybody tell me the strategy statement of the third one? Which firm that belongs to? Correct. Good answer. This strategy statement came off a major legal firm's website in this country, but I bet you nobody in the room knows which firm it is, because no one from that firm is here. But this could be applied to dozens of firms. So this statement doesn't differentiate this firm from any other. It's the same. And there'll be a point in your journey as a law firm where being the same isn't going to serve you. So when you think about writing strategy, the other interesting thing about this strategy, in terms of advantage, how many words are in that statement that deal with advantage? 2. If we look at the other strategy statements, about a third, a third, a third. There's a mixture of those 3 things in the communication. And we need to lead with strategy. So you need to excite your people and you need to excite your clients with where you're going. They want to know that they feel safe. They want to know that you're going to take them through this next stage of the cycle. So Fred and I would like to thank you for your time. And it's been great to be here. Thank you.